We are coming up on two anniversaries, one probably much more important than the other. October the 11th is the day that Pope John the 23rd opened the Second Vatican Council, and November 1st, if I remember correctly, in 2022 was the first time that I entered the local Roman Catholic parish church. It would be another couple of years after I first visited our local Catholic parish before I was received into the church. And well, one of the problems of making YouTube videos is it's kind of hard to stop, and one leaves loose ends, and so I get people asking questions. It seemed like you were about to, and now you're doing this, and one tries to make one story somewhat consistent and to make sense. And I often kind of tend to organize my thoughts based on popular songs. And so I'm thinking as I'm leading up to my anniversary of being received in the church, and as we're all leading up to the anniversary of the beginning of Vatican II, in terms of three songs. One, which is kind of the overarching image for this video, is Don McLean's The Day the Music Died. The second, I think there'll only be three videos, one never knows, is one that a video in which I want to look at kind of what the church has provided for laity before and after Vatican II. I'm going to call it The Things We Lost in the Fire, based on a song by Bastille that I find very insightful. And then the third is one which may surprise you, because my major problems with Vatican II is that it's not finished, but we act as if it is. This is not so much the spirit of Vatican II as, Dom Gaspard Guéranger, who was one of the folks who really got more credit perhaps than he needs for restoring Gregorian chant to the glory that I will mention in a moment, said we weren't looking for liturgical renewal, but for liturgical completion. And so that last video is going to be kind of metaphored with Bob Dylan's "There's something going on here, but you don't know what it is. Something happening here, but you don't know what it is, do you, Mr. Jones?" So music, and why I find it so important. I mean, you can read the Psalms and see why it's important. But I remember the first time I ever went into a Roman Catholic church. I was in the 7th grade, and I was dating a young woman who was at the time Roman Catholic, and I was used to the hymns of the Broadman hymnal that we sing in our little Baptist church, and some of them were pretty good. I particularly like all of those from the Southern Harmony, and then there were some from Methodists, and of course, good solid. Well, we were swimming in music that I didn't know at the time was called Gregorian chant, and that I didn't know at the time was directed by my family's physician, our family doctor, back in the days that we had family doctors, a marvelous man who spent one night, for instance, taking care of our dog and the dog of our next door neighbors who had been poisoned. This was Gregorian chant. And if I had had good sense, and if becoming a Roman Catholic in mid-nowhere at that time wasn't kind of like saying, well, I self-identify as a Martian, I would be like the folks from Kiev who visited Hagia Sophia and said, this is the one. but I held out, and I came into the big church in stages. Well, the first time I entered our local parish, I think, was November 1st, because at that time we had a resident pastor. Unfortunately, since then, there are even fewer priests in the Archdiocese of Seattle, and a marvelous doublespeak and lying about what's really happening. We have been reorganized, and parish families were told, oh, this is the best way to do evangelism. And so we have a pastor we almost never see unless he's here for raising money, and we have a vicar who's a very good priest, but he doesn't really have the authority of the past as a pastor, and he also has to travel around to 3 different parishes. But at that time, there was still a local pastor, a young man from West Africa, Father Peter. And Father Peter liked music. And so at the beginning of the Mass that I went to, because I was thinking that the history of the church sort of means we shouldn't be broken up. You know, I was trying to be as ecumenical as possible. And so there was a woman dressed in, you know, again, not her fault. I don't know why the church provided this particular garment for her, but it looked like something from Amazon Halloween costume album. Not a garment of great dignity, although I guess better than jeans and t-shirt, as the lector wore last week. And she's carrying the cross, and the priest follows her, and we sing 2 verses of For All the Saints. And then the rest of the Mass happened. I went forward and received communion because, well, I had done that in Santa Fe, and the Archbishop of Santa Fe knew my lineage and didn't say no. And then I went to sin after that. Oh, and as we were going out, we sang another 2 verses of For All the Saints. I went and talked to Father Peter, and he was a little confused about my status and said maybe I should write some stuff down and send it to him. But he had in the meantime to go back to Africa to get his visa renewed, and that took a long time. And there was really no one I could talk to. I spent some time with the Orthodox. And still, for primarily historical reasons, Jesus says, on this rock I will build my church, not my churches. I gave them another try and ended up. And fortunately, I think very fortunate, not only for me, because it gives me some hope, but also for the parish in general. We have a choir director who has a very good sense of music and its role in the liturgy. Probably because he grew up in an odd little community in Colorado where they still use the music from the old Mass, the Latin hymnody, and so he knows what good music should sound like and what it should be saying. The problem, of course, is that, well, we're supposed to be singing in English. We are encouraged to sing, allowed to sing the Latin propers for the Mass, the Latin ordinary of the Mass, at least during Lent and Easter, but we've got to do something else the rest of the year, and it just makes it difficult. Now, okay. My hopefulness is that just as it took many years for there to be developed real music for what we sometimes call the Mass of the Ages, sometimes call the Tridentine Mass, and you know, we like to think that the Mass didn't change at the Council of Trent, but it did, but not much. You know, when I was in seminary, we were told that you know, the liturgy has always changed over the years, and what's going on now isn't that big a deal. But what went on at Vatican II, which was adopted by most liturgical churches, was a big deal. But the music for the Tridentine Mass had been developed at least since the time of Ambrose of Milan, and who was really the one who wanted to bring hymnody into the liturgy. And now we've had 60 years to come up with music. Maybe there's better music in Italian that's closer to Latin, but for us English-speaking folks, there ain't much that's really good. What we got, as I mentioned, if I haven't mentioned, I will now. I'm having difficulty making this video because I don't want to be just a complainer. I want to end this series hopefully, and yet I have to admit that I live in a place of some disappointment. If you read the documents of Vatican II, they sound pretty good, but of course what we've actually got doesn't always match the documents. And the fourth thing that we should be singing in the Mass are hymns. The first thing are the traditional antiphons, but we've suppressed the offertory antiphon. I didn't learn that till this morning. I mean, in the old Catholic Church we had offertory antiphons. Now we don't. And as I say, usually our choir director does a pretty good job. And when I compare what goes on in our parish with other parishes in our family of parishes, I am really grateful because we tend to have much better music. And the music so much supports the rest of the liturgy, especially in this unfinished time, before Vatican II is completed, and I'll talk about that in a later video, and I don't know that it ever will be as I would wish it to be, but hope swings eternal in the human breast. But our choir master took Saturday off this past week, and he has to be there for Wednesday for choir practice, and also Vespers and the Vigil Mass, the Sunday Spanish Mass and the Sunday English Mass. And our pastor used to come around 2 Mondays a month, doesn't do that anymore, so it seems only fair that our choir director should get one Saturday off. But Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy, Lord have mercy. What we had that Sunday was volunteers who were very much, I think, in the spirit of Vatican II, unfortunately. And so our entrance hymn was something you may know, Here I Am, Lord, very, very personal and emotional. And it completely misunderstands, using that kind of music as an entrance hymn, misunderstands the great drama and development that happens in the liturgy. I made, and I think deleted, a video about the brilliance of Cranmer. Whether you like his theology or not, he certainly had a wonderful sense of drama, and his liturgy makes very clear what is happening, and that we are indeed saved, and we, at the end of the Mass, we know we're saved. And well, if you go to an opera, you go to a Broadway musical, back when there were Broadway musicals and operas, they would start with a big aria or a big overture, or you come in with a big song because you were being reminded that here is something magnificent that is happening. And if we don't have a concept of the Mass as magnificent, well, we're diminishing the sacrifice of Christ. So that's kind of where I am now. I understand the good, and I think I understand. I will grant that there were good intentions of the folks at Vatican II. But I wonder whether it might not have been wiser to have not promulgated. I love saying the word promulgated. It sounds slightly nasty, doesn't it? They promulgated the missal of Paul VI without promulgating a hymnal of Paul VI. And I guess these days they whether they might call it an antiphonale of Paul VI, or they might call it a hymnal, I don't know. But all I'm getting at is to have the words without the music. It's not the same. And I'm hoping that it isn't really that the music is dead, or even that the music was put to sleep, but that is gestating. And we it's a little hope I can see, for instance, we finally have a hymnal for the liturgy of the hours, a hymnal, what do they call it, divine office hymnal. And the music in it is ever so much better than the grab bag of hymns that are stuck in the back of the liturgy of the hours, which tend, as often as not, to be the hymns that we sing in my little Baptist church in mid-nowhere, because, well, that's what we had in English at the time. Still, it's awfully hard to look at what's going on right now, the current state of music in the Mass. And in most parishes, I mean, there are exceptions. I watched this morning a Mass from St. John Cantius in Chicago, and it was an encouragement to go ahead and make this video, because they have this guy there who is doing his PhD in how the choices made in liturgy affect how people worship. And I'm going to look and see if I can find either some videos he has made or some writings of his that make a link. If there's not, I couldn't. But I feel often as if the efforts of and there are folks who say, well, the stonecutters got into the Vatican II and are cutting it apart. I often feel like Vatican II is as destructive as the Reformation was. So I'm going to end this video with parts of Psalm 74 in a translation I used for many years when I followed that irregular one-year lectionary. I found out this week that I had celebrated the Ember Days wrong. The Ember Days were suppressed at Vatican II. But early on in the process, John the 23rd said that they should be moved from the traditional time on the Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday following the Feast of the Exaltation of the Most Holy and Life-Giving Cross to the next week. Now, then they were suppressed, so why should that matter? The FSSP folks, the fraternity of, I never remember exactly what that means. It begins with fraternity and ends with Peter, who are kind of skating on thin ice because they still have this special allowance to use the Latin Mass. And anytime what was forbidden, what was required is now forbidden, seems odd to me. But anyway, they celebrate the Ember Days the way John the 23rd said it should happen. I'm going to risk it and not change. But anyway, I don't know if I want to begin with lift up thy feet, that thou mayest destroy every enemy which has done evil in thy sanctuary or not. So let's begin with verse 5. Thine adversaries roar in the midst of thy congregations and set up their banners for tokens. They that hewed timber afore out of the thick trees was known to bring to it an excellent work. But now they break down all the carved work thereof with axes and hammers. They have set fire upon thy holy places, and have defiled the dwelling place of thy name, even into the ground. Yea, they said in their hearts, let us make havoc of them altogether. Thus have they burned up all the houses of God in the land. We see not our tokens. There is not one prophet more. No, not one is there among us that understandeth any more. O God, how long shall the adversary do this dishonor? Shall the enemy blaspheme thy name forever? Well, I'm hoping I get around to the third of this series of videos. There's something going on here, and you don't know what it is, do you, Mr. Jones? That I can end on a more hopeful note. But I think we need to recognize what a marvelous treasure the liturgy is, and how we really need to do it as well as possible. And if we don't admit that we are, not taking it as seriously as we might, having a family of parishes is not going to bring more people into the house of God. Just saying.